Stanford University.
Afternoon. Welcome to the Computer Systems Seminar of the Stanford Electrical Engineering Department.
My name's Dennis Allison. I'm the other half of the team that runs this thing. And I guess the first thing to tell you is who our speaker is next week. And that will be Carl Hewitt. He's emeritus from MIT. And he's going to be talking on scalable, privacy-friendly client cloud computing, a gathering perfect disruption, which is, I think, a fancy way of saying he's talking about cloud computing and how to make it really work. Our speaker today is Jane McGonigal. She's at the Institute for the Future, a group which predicts the future. No, excuse me.
Wait till slide number 3. You're going to feel really bad about what you just said.
It looks at possibilities for the future.
Yeah.
Paul Saffo, who was for a long time involved with them, has been a frequent speaker here. And it's an interesting thing. She's been working on games for a long time. Several years ago, she came and talked about one aspect of games. This is a piece of that same piece of work. And you're on.
Yay, great, thanks. Thanks everybody for coming out today. This is a non-technical talk. This is a big idea talk. I'm a game designer. I'm not a game developer, so I don't do code. I do interaction design, I do experience architecture, community engineering, and if you don't know anything about what I do, I should tell you right off the bat that I don't make games that are set in virtual environments or games that are set in 3D graphical environments. The kind of games I work on, they're called alternate reality games, and they are to gaming what ubiquitous computing is to computer science. So just like ubiquitous computing says, sit in front of a computer and do computing, blah, we should have computers everywhere and move from computing environment to computing environment seamlessly. Alternate reality game designers say, sit in front of my computer playing my Xbox 360. No, I should be out in the world playing games everywhere I go, using every possible platform. So that's the kind of game that I develop, and that means that the games run on everything from instant message, GPS devices, anything that has a display when it's connected to a network, we can put into the game, including like toasters that print missions onto your toast in the morning if it's connected to the network. So that's the kind of game I do. It's different from what you might typically think of for video or computer gaming. So we'll get that off right off the bat. I'm here today to talk to you about a game that I just launched 9 days ago. So this is super new and super fresh. So it comes with the sort of advanced warning that this is not a polished talk that I have given many times. It's fresh off having launched this experience, and we're in the throes of running it. So it's a lot of kind of new ideas, new thinking about what games can do. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of think out loud a little bit this week about this new project. So the game that I'm going to be telling you about, it's called SuperStruct. And in case anybody tunes out here or at home, the main thing that you want to do after this talk is go to the game, sign up, and play. It runs for 5 more weeks, and I want everyone in this room to contribute their intelligence to the game. So it's superstructgame.org. So just in case I lose you, superstructgame.org. Okay. So the game, it's on the web page, but you know, I'm going to say it about 20 times so everybody knows it by heart at the end of the talk. So the game is about solving the 5 biggest problems that we will face globally in the next 10 years. And so I'll just give you a sneak preview of what they are. So we're calling these super threats. These are the 5 most complicated, hard to solve problems that humanity faces. The first is quarantine. Quarantine has to do with pandemics and how we will solve them and face them. Wow, that's a lot of light. Ravenous has to do with disruptions of the global food supply chain, everything from food safety issues to food shortages. Power struggle has to do with the infrastructure bottleneck that we might face as we try and wean ourselves off an oil economy and get onto alternative fuel economies. What happens when the infrastructure isn't quite there yet, that sort of transitional period. Outlaw Planet is about social disruption of a particular kind. It's what happens when hackers, gamers, and griefers decide to try their hand at interfering with the mobile networks and sensory networks that run our lives. So sort of hacking our lives instead of just hacking our networks. And finally, Generation Exile, which deals with the possibility of 250 million climate refugees 10 years from now, as we start to see really drastic disruptions to where it is livable with the climate. And what will we do with 250 million people who are forced to leave their countries and swarm the planet looking for somewhere new to live? So these are 5 problems that we're trying to solve with a game, which might seem kind of, I don't know, a strange idea. You might want to solve them with like serious things, but we're trying to solve them with a game. And as I said, the game is called SuperStruct. Our tagline is play the game, invent the future. So I thought it would be useful before I show you the game to tell you a little bit about what I think about the future and what I think about games, so that you can kind of see how they come together in this project. So I am at the Institute for the Future. I've been a researcher there for 2 years since I finished my PhD at UC Berkeley, which was in performance studies, and I worked in the computer science department trying to create scalable remote collaboration systems in the form of online games. And at the Institute for the Future, I'm now the Director of Game Research and Development, which means I think about how the games that we make and play today might influence how we do real work and live our real lives in the future. And this is one of our new sort of, I don't know, taglines, messages at the Institute for the Future, which has to do with not wanting to predict the future. Predicting the future is really hard, even with prediction markets, which I'm somewhat a fan of. It's really hard, and more importantly, it's not that useful. If you predict the future, what you get is a competitive advantage against everybody else who doesn't see the future coming, and that's good, but then you're stuck with whatever future you predicted, and it might not be a good future. So wouldn't it be better if we sat around now and decided what kind of future we want to be living in, and then we actually do something to create the desirable future that we want? And so instead of trying to see the future, maybe we ought to try and make the future. So that's one of the big shifts of the Institute for the Future in recent years, and the games that I'm making are part of that effort to try and kind of hack the future before it gets here, so that we're not stuck with a future we don't want. Right, okay, good. So here's the future that I am working towards, that I'm trying to hack. This idea that a game designer might be nominated for a Nobel Prize by the year 2032. You laugh now, but you just wait. 2031, I'll be calling you up saying, check out the New York Times. So yeah, it's Nobel Prize season, and this is just something that I've been thinking about a lot for the last couple years. Games are an extremely powerful tool for engagement, and so it seems like getting people to engage with really important issues and perhaps even behave differently would be something awesome that we could do with games. However, I am perfectly prepared to be proven wrong. I think there is an equally possible outcome other than a game designer being nominated for the Nobel Prize, which is that we could have a horde of game players, a kind of game-playing collective or guild, actually be nominated for a Nobel Prize. And I'm thinking the Peace Prize, but there are other scenarios that make sense that I'd be happy to spin out for you later. So the idea that we could make a game that would empower ordinary people to contribute to solving the problems of humanity. I think that's possible. I think it might take a couple decades to really change the world, but so we're starting now with some prototypes and that sort of thing. Okay, why do I think games and gamers are capable of solving the world's problems? Maybe you have heard this quote before from Albert Einstein. It's one of my favorites. I think about it a lot when I'm designing games. It's the idea that games are the most elevated form of investigation. So does anybody, yeah, you guys know, what game was Einstein addicted to? Anybody? Not World of Warcraft. Chess. that would be good too. Yeah, he was an avid chess player, and he would play chess all day long. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what he meant by games are the most elevated form of investigation. He's a scientist, like that's kind of a weird thing to say. And the way I sort of think about it is, you take a game like chess. This is a game that you develop a great intimacy with and familiarity with over your lifetime as a player. Every time you sit down to play, you're learning something new about the system, you're testing out a different strategy, you're coming at it from a different point of view, and more importantly, the person who's sitting across the game playing it with you is testing your assumptions about it, challenging the way that you approach that system, and providing you with a kind of another point of view on the problem that is chess, right? So every game is basically a problem space. Chess is a kind of a spatial problem, it's a little bit of a social problem, a strategy problem. And so, with games, you get to sit down and explore a problem with somebody else. You have your attention focused at the same time on the game, and you get really familiar with it over time. You play it again and again. You develop this really dense knowledge base about the system. So I think that's what Einstein meant by games being the most elevated form of investigation. They really lift us to a much deeper and a kind of more intimate way of knowing a system. So nowadays we have games that are really interesting from an investigation standpoint because of how densely networked they are. So anybody know what game this is? I have the War Games poster above my desk at home, so I appreciate that shout out. This is EVE Online, which is a kind of space game, and this is a map of their players, and it's a great visual because you see there's like it's this network. It's kind of got people on the outliers doing weird stuff. But they're still connected to each other. And then you've got this hub of people in the middle, and they're just there, they're gaming together, they're working on the system together. And I look at this and I think about how great it would be to apply this kind of network to investigations and problem solving, where you have this kind of fiery core of people doing this investigation, testing the system, trying out different strategies, and then you've got all these people sort of mapping out the perimeter, right? Because when you're trying to solve a problem, you don't want to just focus on, the central possibilities. You want to really map the weird extremities, because it might be on the outlier regions that like insight happens or innovation happens. So games are really good for providing that. And anyway, so we've got all these network gamers doing these crazy things, and so at IFTF, one thing we do is this kind of future forecasts. These are not predictions, but they're something we feel fairly confident about as a plausible scenario for the future. And what I'm seeing over the next 5 years is really that we're going to see gamers banding together in these kind of MMO, massively multiplayer online environments, in order to save the real world. Instead of just going on these kind of fantasy quests and these sort of mythological adventures. So that's what I think about the future, and kind of what I think about games. I think that games will be one of the most important materials of the future. I talked about wanting to make the future. In order to make the future, you really have to understand what the materials of the future will be. So what are the important technologies, what are the important concepts, sort of social changes that we'll be able to use to shape the future? I think games will be one of them. You guys probably know all this stuff already, but I'll just throw this out there, because especially sometimes if you're a gamer, you don't realize how many of us there are. Right now, 65% of US households play computer and video games, which is a lot. It's the majority. So sometimes for a while, people are like, oh, gamers are kind of a minority. Gamers are the majority now, which is good, because we want more people playing games. 88% of people who are under 18 play regularly every week. And what the game industry has seen since its kind of birth is that people who play games weekly when they're young and growing up do not stop playing games. It becomes part of their sort of lifestyle, part of their part of what they seek out when they're trying to engage with something. So with 88% of youth in the U.S. doing that now, we're looking at huge demographics of people looking for games to play and ways to be kind of gameful in their lives. And then there's all the serious gaming stuff. So like 70% of large U.S. companies and nonprofits are training, and then 78% think they're going to start doing that. So, serious games too. And already in 2008, the average gamer is 35. 1 in 4 gamers are over 50. And I would tell people that, and they're like, what? That doesn't make sense, and I've never played a game. And then like 5 minutes later, they say, oh, I played Wii. Like, that doesn't count. It's very interesting. But there's a whole range of digital games and computer games. And 40% of gamers are women now, so that's good. Everybody's playing. $68 billion by 2012. And most interestingly, There are hundreds of millions of people worldwide now. I think we're kind of, being in the US, we're a little bit isolated from the bigger gaming phenomenon that's happening, particularly in Eastern Europe and Asia. These numbers, you can go up another 1 or 2 orders of magnitude for that sort of hours and percentage of people who are hardcore gamers. So worldwide, there are hundreds of millions of people who are spending upwards of 20 hours a week playing computer and video games. So that's a lot of hours being invested in game spaces. It's kind of an untapped resource. Right now, people are gaming largely for escapism, for social support, for a sense of being challenged in a way that they're not in real life. And I'm really excited about the idea of siphoning off some of that desire to be engaged into real-world problem solving. You may know the economist Ted Castronovo. He's written a lot about games, virtual worlds. He says that what we're witnessing, especially abroad, is basically this global mass exodus to virtual worlds and online game environments. It's an exodus of time and attention and money and passion. And the thing that he says that I completely agree with is that this is in no way irrational. This is like completely rational. And anybody who looks at a gamer who's spending more than 20 hours a week playing the game and is like, oh, what's wrong with them? I don't understand it. They're missing out on life. The opposite is true. For most people who are investing that much time in games, the games are just providing them a better experience than reality is. So this is perfectly rational. For many people, games are making us happier than our real lives are, and they're helping us do more amazing things together than we think we can do in reality. And I don't know. For me, this is sort of one of the biggest problems / biggest opportunities we face as a global society over the next couple of decades is figuring out whether we're going to keep making more and more immersive, awesome games that make up for how much our lives can suck, or if we're going to try and improve the way we design our lives and societies by applying what we've learned in game design to designing real life, right? So this is graffiti near where I live in Berkeley right now. Although I'm moving to San Francisco so you can hate me less. But it's a piece of graffiti that really resonates with me as a gamer and a lot of gamers I know. This sort of idea that I'm not good at life, because when you're a gamer, you're good at your games. You're effective. You understand how the system works. You know how to just get what you want out of that system. You're surrounded by people who think you're great when you're successful, and they're there to be your allies, they're there to support you, and even if they're trying to kill you, they're still kind of collaborating with you because they're supporting the game world with you. They're agreeing that this game is important. They're agreeing to focus their attention on the game world with you. And so it's like this intense community experience, and I don't know, I just don't get it when I wake up and go about my everyday life. And think about something like World of Warcraft, where you're getting constant feedback on how awesome you are, like all your talents going up and your strengths going up, and you sort of, all this information is laid out in front of you. Like at every minute, there's something for you to do that matters, which is not something we have in real life. It's not like I wake up in the morning and I turn on my laptop and it's like, wouldn't it be great but this is like, the Bay Area, and look at these things for you to do and all these people who want to help you, and you're getting more and more awesome every day. That's my dream game. It doesn't exist now. And then you think about what gamers are doing outside of when they're in the virtual environment. This is the World of Warcraft wiki on Wikia, which has 5 million people come to this wiki every month. There are only 10 million subscribers worldwide. So it's half of the World of Warcraft game playing public comes to this wiki, and they've got 134,000 pages of knowledge all about World of Warcraft. It's the biggest wiki in the world after Wikipedia, and it is, including anything on Wikipedia, it's what the most wiki knowledge has been generated about of any subject in the world. There's no subject in the world that has more wiki knowledge than World of Warcraft. So it's not just that they're being engaged in the environment, it's that they're being called to this kind of collaborative knowledge building experience, and it's amazing. They're not just playing, they're trying to build knowledge. So this is great, and this is good news, and this is bad news, but we can fix it. And one other thing I wanted to just kind of gloss over, I do a lot of work with positive psychology. My twin sister, Kelly McGonigal, is in the psychology department here at Stanford. So if you see someone who kind of looks like me but with shorter hair, and and she's like across the street. That's my sister Kelly. And so she's in psychology, and she's gotten me into positive psychology, which is like the opposite of most psychology. It tells you what's wrong with you and mental illness and all of that. Positive psychology looks at what makes us happy, what makes us well and satisfied and all of that. So all these great books, and I've been reading and for years, and there's sort of 4 big takeaways about what makes us happy. So it's like satisfying work to do, wake up in the morning with something concrete and specific that you're supposed to do. The experience of being good at something or getting good at something. You don't have to be famous or rich, but if you can feel like, I have these talents and strengths and they're actually being used. And then time spent with people we like. Even if you're introverted, there are people that you like, and that sort of social support system is important for everybody. And the chance to be part of something bigger, to feel like there's something bigger than your own life that you can contribute to. And then, in reality, most of us, we might find that in art or science or religion or maybe like our family genealogy. But so these are the 4 things that make people happy across the world. There are different demographic things like, beyond this list of 4 and cultural things, but these 4 seem to be universal. So what's interesting is that they seem to be exactly the things that make games work better than reality, right? So like, we have satisfying work to do. Well, games give us really good instructions and sort of missions that give us something satisfying to do. And, we want the experience of being good at something, and games are providing us all this feedback so that we're naturally getting better and better over time. And we want time spent with people we like, and games give us this amazing community. And, we want to be a chance of something bigger. And games just give us these amazing emotions that make us feel like, we are part of a bigger project. We're part of a mythology. We're part of a narrative, and the success that we feel. It's like epic, right? Like, we don't use the terms epic in our real lives as much as we do in games. Of people who play games, you have epic failure and epic win, and in real life, not so much. So, okay, so that's really interesting that positive psychology, all these scientists are basically saying that what makes us happy is what games do really well. So basically, about a year now, I've been working under the assumption that multiplayer games are the ultimate happiness engines. And I do a lot of, I do commercial game design stuff too. And I work with a lot of people in the game development industry. And so this has kind of been one of the breakthrough thinking of the last year within the game industry, sort of coming to realize that we control these sort of happiness engines, and that a large reason that people play them is because it's like making them feel better than real life does, and what should we do with that power, and so on. Okay, so here's what I think we should do with the power that we have as game developers, and for people who aren't yet game designers or game developers, here's why I think it would be good for you to sort of increase your game design literacies and play more games yourself. Games such as SuperStructGame.org. How many of you guys have read Clay Shirky's book? Oh, everybody should read Clay Shirky's book, right? Best book of the year for my money, in terms of really explaining the sort of the zeitgeist of what's happening now in technology. So Clay Shirky's big premise in this book, Here Comes Everybody, is that we have evolved as a society so that we have a lot of free time and a lot of underutilized resources. So if you think about developing countries where they spend the vast majority of their day trying to get clean water, trying to feed themselves, trying to take care of the basic survival needs, we don't see the kind of depression or malaise or anxiety that we see in sort of fully developed countries, because they are constantly engaged in the struggle to survive. They're using all of their cognitive resources, they're using all their social resources, and even though we might think that that is the most miserable existence we can imagine because it's so hard, in fact, from a kind of quality of life perspective and a happiness perspective, they're achieving a much higher degree of engagement and in many respects higher quality of life than how we typically define quality of life in terms of economic development. Clay Shirky is saying, well, now in all these countries where we've got all this free time, we've got all this sort of technology lying around that we're tapping into for social reasons, that people are trying to figure out what to do with that surplus, and they're applying it to things like Wikipedia and Flickr and games and Facebook as a way of sort of using up that social surplus or cognitive surplus. So you see things like the proliferation now of social networks, of crowdsourcing systems, mass collaboration systems, sort of collective intelligence projects. The idea is we're going to harness everybody's cognitive surplus and social surplus, and we're going to put it to a project like Wikipedia. Now, I think here are all the buzzwords. Every week there's a new conference about one of these subjects and a new bestseller business book about one of these subjects. This is the wave of the future. But there's a problem, which is the more and more people make these projects, we're competing for a scarce resource, which is people's participation bandwidth. So this is, I mentioned I do actual research besides make games. This is the subject of my new research that's coming out in late November, so sneak preview. But this is a term that I've coined to talk about all this cognitive and social surplus being engaged, the economy of engagement. So it's like, forget the attention economy, right? We don't just want people to pay attention anymore. What we want is for them to actually do something. If we're asking them to trade in prediction markets, they actually have to think and do. I mean, if we want to build a social network around whatever we're trying to build a network around, they have to show up and engage. So the same thing goes for any crowdsourcing or mass collab project. Well, that participation bandwidth is going to become increasingly scarce. As more and more people make these social experiences and make these collaborative platforms, someone like me is only going to have so many hours in a day to contribute to your, human intelligence task or your network. So what are we going to do to engage people effectively and sort of keep them engaged for longer periods of time so that the sort of total bandwidth that's available to us as a society actually grows? Because if we make really engaging systems, then we can probably siphon off lots and lots of engagement. So, okay, by way of example of this sort of surplus, Clay Shirky worked with some researchers at IBM to calculate how long it took to create Wikipedia. From its inception to its current state this past spring. And for the whole English language Wikipedia, every article, every edit, they calculated that it took 100 million mental hours to create that. So you can imagine if 1 million people spent 100 hours over the course of several years contributing, right? You would be able to add up to 100 million mental hours. So thinking of one of the most important online games, World of Warcraft, so 10 million subscribers now. They average 16 hours a week playing, right? So that's 5 days of World of Warcraft engagement to make Wikipedia. That's crazy, right? Because that game's been running for years. Think of all of the interesting projects that we could be working on if we occasionally siphoned off some of that engagement to something else. Now, I am not the person who stands up and says, great, now we can stop those people from gaming and we can get them to do something real and productive, because I think gaming is real and productive, and I think when you're playing these games, you're learning all these amazing things and developing all kinds of collaboration superpowers. So, I don't want people to stop playing what we consider entertainment games, because they're getting really good at stuff that then we need them to apply in real life. So I'm literally saying, let's take 5 days a year out of something like World of Warcraft, which is just one game, and think about applying that to something else. So here's the something else that I'm doing now as a kind of prototype for siphoning off gamer intelligence to solve real problems. And why don't I think the first thing I should show you, I'll show you one of the videos for the game. No, let me show you the next slide. Okay, so in a nutshell, what is SuperStruct? SuperStruct is a game set in the year 2019. It's about 5 super threats. So the 5 super threats I told you earlier: quarantine, ravenous, power struggle, outlaw planet, and generation exile. What we think will be the 5 biggest challenges in the year 2019. And the community that forms around these super threats are players. They're called SEHIs, which is short for super empowered hopeful individuals. So we're basically starting with a really dark vision of the future. We are barely surviving as a species. When we launched the game, we started with a report from the Global Extinction Awareness System, which is a supercomputer that's tracking lots of data about the viability of different species. And it had correctly predicted the extinction of a breed of squirrels and some geese. And now it said that the human species is likely to suffer a catastrophic collapse by the year 2042. You wake up, this is how the game starts, and it's kind of dark. But so on the flip side, we've got our players who, instead of running around and screaming about, we're all dying, They're going to empower themselves into SEHIs by forming a community around solving these super threats. And the infrastructure for this community to work is something that we're calling superstructures. To superstruct, which is a real word, we did not make it up, although when we were thinking of names for the game, and I pulled that out of a thesaurus and we Googled it, there were only like 7 results, which is a really good sign if you're thinking of naming something and there are only 7 results. It means that from then on, you will own all of the Google results. So that was one of the factors in picking that as a name. And SuperStruct means to build on top of existing infrastructure. So we're asking people to take all of the ways that we organize now, whether it's families, schools, governments, nonprofits, companies that are for-profit, social networks, any kind of group or organization, and to hybridize them and to form new ways of organizing, new groups, new organizations that can solve these problems in really kind of nimble, ad hoc, weird, crazy ways. Basically, the instructions are, invent an organization that is like nothing we have ever seen or heard of before. And what we hope at the end of the game, which is running for 6 weeks, is that one, we'll have activated a band of allies who now know about some of the problems we might face in the future, and they're going to be all like revved up to do something about it. We're creating a free public resource. All of the game content that's generated, we're going to keep online and publicly accessible indefinitely so people can come and study it and see what they think. And we're also going to produce a 10-year forecast of what we think organization will be like in the year 2019, what collaboration will be like in the year 2019, based on what we see players do. Let me show you that video now. So this is just to give you an idea of, when you come to the game site, how do you get immersed into these scenarios? This is Outlaw Planet. This is the hacker griefer scenario. So let's take a look at this.
Welcome to the Global Extinction Awareness System. You are watching Super Threat number 4, Outlaw Planet.
Can you hear okay?
In 2019, the mobile internet and censored networks we rely on to hold our societies together are being hacked, griefed, and gamed. Hardest hit: the democratic process, social networks, every institution connected to the internet. Volunteers report from the front lines of the Outlaw Planet super threat. GS volunteer Something Lawful 839 reports from Kuala Lumpur, where the Republican Bank of Malaysia was hit this morning by the third major online banking attack this week. Financial leaders believe the attacks are related to last month's breach of the Korea International Bank by hardcore players of the World of StarCraft game. Both hacked banks are major players in the virtual currency market. Something Lawful writes, internet security specialists are downplaying the attacks, but we know that these are just another example of the ongoing virtual assaults on the planet's basic operating infrastructure. How can we come together to secure our assets, both real and virtual? GS Volunteer Daily Jolt is live blogging from Washington, D.C., where representatives from the Electronic Frontier Foundation are about to testify in the ongoing hearings on last November's midterm elections. The group's testimony is expected to call for a do-over election, after hacking of voting systems left a third of the Senate and most House seats in question. Daily Jolt reports, it's hard to believe that almost a year later, the courts are still battling over who will be seated. No wonder legal historians are calling the situation the biggest constitutional crisis in U.S. history. How can we uphold civic rights in network-enabled democracies? GS volunteer OK Manny reports from a hotel in Mendocino, California, that media drones have successfully penetrated the secret conclave of state and federal officials who have been negotiating the terms of secession by 4 western states, including California. This is the first known use of drones for political coverage. Previously, they were limited to documenting celebrity life in our age of robotic paparazzi. The governor's office was swift to respond to this most recent intrusion, demanding that drone attacks be treated as felony crimes. But OK Manny says, this is fantastic, forget celebrity gossip. We can finally know what our governments are really up to. More drones please. Who gets to set the rules for transparency in our society? GS volunteer Javed Puri tells us that censor net warnings from the Indian Ocean have sent thousands of South Asians rushing from the coastal areas into the hills. but the warnings are most likely spoofs of the tsunami warning system by pirates seeking cover for yet another heist of offshore oil. Javed reports, "We are getting closer and closer to a boy who cried wolf scenario. It will be disaster when a true tsunami hits and we ignore it as just more sensor spam. How can we prevent spam from crippling our most important sensory networks? Together we can survive the outlaw planet super threat." GS volunteers are organizing now at superstructgame.org. Join us to invent the future of security.
Yay. So we have videos like that for Ravenous, which is inventing the future of food, Quarantine, which is inventing the future of health, Power Struggle, which is inventing the future of energy, and Generation Exile, which is inventing the future of society. So let's wander over to the site. This is where the talk gets kind of like funky because, as I said, the game just launched and I've never talked about it before. But I thought I would just show you around a bit. What time are we at here? Great. So when you come to the site, you can adopt a super threat, which sort of indicates which one you want to work on. But already, and we encourage this, we're seeing players kind of bringing together different super threats to do interesting things. So for Quarantine, and when I say players are doing interesting things, we basically open up the internet for their storytelling about what's happening in the future. So if you click on Tell a Story, all you have to do is submit a link to anything that you've created on the internet that is about these super threats. So people are doing podcasts and videos and manga, comic strips and blog posts and their Twitter feeds. Like you can sign up for a Twitter feed. All the Twitters are the tweets are from the year 2019. So there's like a blog roll of people blogging from 2019. And their stories get posted here, so you can see like, here's a chemically induced midlife crisis. Smart drug causes people to question why they work at all. Let's see some other interesting ones. Redback raves dance in the face of destruction. Yeah, this one's kind of interesting. So yesterday in Quarantine, a player put up a story about the CDC and this REDS relief group. REDS is the pandemic, the respiratory distress syndrome. And they put up a story about how they're strongly urging that you not assemble in public or social gatherings of more than 12 bodies in order to slow the contagion vectors and that sort of thing. And they use social network theory to back it up. It was really quite interesting because 12 is sort of the optimal intimate social experience number, so they felt like people could still have good social experience but limit the contagion. So then immediately a player from the Outlaw Planet scenario put up this thing. Is it loading? That's weird, it's not loading. Oh, here it is loading. Saying crazy calls for voluntary limits to social gatherings of 12 people or less are being actively thwarted by a spontaneous movement styled on the bareback parties of the 1990s. Redback raves organize parties of over 100 people, apparently operating a strictly no-mask policy under the slogan, breathe each other, to dance to the sexiest bio-sharing beats on the earth. Total effing lunacy, because that person's playing with this idea of like sort of social terrorists or hacking and griefing. So of course you would have this sort of backlash, and so the people are just playing off of each other and sort of propelling these scenarios forward. And what we think is really useful about this, like prediction markets have been proven really effective at successfully correctly predicting the outcome to questions that we know the answers to. Who will win the election? How much will something cost on a given day? But if you want to ask a question where you have no idea what the parameters are, like what would happen if the government tried to limit social gatherings to 12 people, you need something much more open-ended and much more multifaceted than a prediction market. So what players are doing is they're telling us, well, if this happened, here's what I'd do. Here's what my company would do. Here's what my neighbors would do. And we're getting the sort of, that multifaceted understanding of a system that I was talking about earlier with the Einstein quote. So they're telling stories, and there's discussion forums for sort of strategizing out loud about these things. So I don't know, like some of the discussions are, transportation issues, non-theism in the face of disaster, the human race is coming to an end, so what? So there's like a voluntary extinction movement that's starting, which is kind of weird and foul. And then the other thing you do is you superstruct, which is you create these these ideas for organizations. So here are the last ones that were added like over the last hour. 21st Century Wonder Tales, so that's sort of storytellers the globe over. Global Council on Statesmanship, I don't know what that is. Monarchs and aristocrats, blah, 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 doing something. Bank of Common Knowledge, Institute for a Future, that's interesting, I wonder if they're competitive. SS Africa Unite, the Meme Machine, the New Modesty. There's all these, so people just propose these organizations, and then they're like wikis, and you join them and you edit them. And so they're just sort of, this is how I would save the world. And then you recruit people with knowledge or expertise to contribute. So I'm doing a superstructure for the quarantine super threat. I'm a game developer, so I can get game developers to help save the world. So the idea here is like, what could you uniquely do in the face of these super threats that is really particular to what you know and who you know. So I thought, how can I help quarantine? Well, I make games. Good games right now, as they're currently designed, like they kind of keep you, I don't know, in your basement or at home in front of a screen by yourself playing. So that's really good in a time of pandemic because we want people to stay at home by themselves and not be out spreading illness. So maybe game developers could work with health officials to design games during times of outbreaks, specifically designed to encourage people to stay home. So kind of like public service games that keep people from spreading the disease. Like that could be a plausible solution to the super threat. So now I've invited like all my friends in the International Game Developers Association to come and brainstorm what games would you design during a quarantine. And so people are just using their own networks and their own talents and skills to propose solutions. So that's what's going on. That's the game. And you can adopt these super threats. You can do them in combination. And then the way you advance through the game, there's scores related to your SuperStruct powers, and I'll just let you sort of wonder what it might mean to have a high ping quotient or mob ability or whatever. Those are skills that you earn that have to do with how well you can collaborate on extreme scales. SuperStructGame.org is where you can play, and it's only running for 5 more weeks, so we wanted to really get a sort of critical mass of people contributing. We were at the website. It says there are 4,044 players as of today, so we've been running for 10 days. My goal is to get up to 10,000 players. I think that would be a super critical mass of people to have played for 5 weeks in this environment, so y'all should join us in that. And if I could sum up for you guys kind of what's important about all this stuff. So first, I think it's better to try to invent the future than to predict the future. Second, to invent the future, we really need as many people as possible to participate. Games, I think, are the ideal platform for harnessing participation bandwidth, and especially in a sort of clogged environment of social media and collaboration systems. And so perhaps we can and should invent the future by playing games together. And I want to invite you all to help with this mission in one particular way that only you can really help, maybe some of the people online, but maybe not. This Monday at IFTF, it's right across the street from the Caltrain station on University Avenue, easy to get to. We're doing a meetup, and the Sundance Channel is filming us. They're doing a show about SuperStruct. And so we need people who have never played the game before, or people who rush home after this talk and play the game all weekend. Either one is fine, to come, and we're going to just register you, show you how to play. We're going to do missions together, and or just drink bootleg champagne from the year 2019. Yes, I'm bringing lots of that because it's also my birthday, and I'm going to have a birthday cake with 10 extra candles because I'm going to be really old in 2019. So I hope that you guys will consider coming out to that because that would be awesome. And I think we have some time for questions and commentary and whatnot. Thank you.
Set this up with a fixed duration?
Yeah, it's a super good question. So the last game I ran that was online and massively collaborative ran for 6 months. And we could do that because we had a lot of budget and because it seemed like a good duration for that project. The two critical factors are how long can you engage people's attention and get a critical enough mass that you get the sort of emergent effect of a bunch of people playing together. If we were to run this game for longer than 6 weeks, I think we might have some attenuation. Like, I think you could probably get really into SuperStruct for a month, but after that you might go on to the next thing. So we wanted as many people as possible at the same time participating, because that bouncing back and weird emergent stuff is what we're interested in. Also, from a budget standpoint, to run one of these games, you need a live crew of people who are constantly kind of tweaking things in real time. So I can show you. We have a team of 10. We call them puppet masters because they kind of run the game. We have a team of 10 global puppet masters who are working full time on this, and they work around the clock. We hire them in different time zones so that. 1 week it's cool to have like people in different countries with that perspective, but also so literally the game is updating around the clock. And so everywhere from like Brazil to New Zealand, we have these puppet masters working, and they're doing things like publishing kind of like updates. So here's like the first Ravenous update that was published, and this synthesizes what they thought was like the most interesting contributed content. So these are all links. All these links are to player-created content. And so the puppet masters are trying to, in real time, synthesize and give the community feedback. So it's like, okay, here are the 20 like craziest ideas you came up with. Now, but look what happened. Here's how Outlaw Planet responded. Go. And then week 2, we do another update. So in order to pay people to do that, you need a budget. And if this were some kind of IFTF's a nonprofit, and we're doing this without any commercial funders. So one could easily imagine SuperStruct, a whole year-long game with a commercial sponsor or with some kind of business model. But for now, for time, for attention time, and also for budget reasons, 6 weeks. Yeah.
Curious about your conviction that games are intrinsically good. I don't know if it's a fair characterization of your beliefs, but it seems that that even if games are not, useful, quote unquote, serious, productive and so forth, you believe that there is something intrinsically valuable and good about games. And it seems that what's behind that is that games bring people joy and help people detach from the quiet desperation of reality. But the same can be said and is often said about the drug cocaine. So what is it about games specifically? Is it only that, or is there more? Why are games intrinsically good?
A couple of things. This is a great question. I do think there's something intrinsic to games, although I just started writing a book. So the book is all about what is intrinsically good and powerful about games. So that will take longer to get into than probably we have here. But to start, I am a Buddhist, and I believe in ending suffering. And one of the things that I've found to be true of games is that when we're playing games, we're not suffering. So if we look at sort of the history of humanity, games were originally invented. This is our best historical understanding of when games were invented many thousands of years ago in the kingdom of Lydia during a famine. And so one of the earliest Greek histories talks about how the Lydians invented dice games as a way to provide people from relief from the starving. So they would play games on one day, and then they would eat on the next, and then they would play and they would eat, and they would be so immersed in the games that they wouldn't notice that they were starving. I believe there is something, whether that's a literal truth to the history of games, or whether that was just something Herodotus wrote because it seemed apt. I think there's something about the immersive power of games and the way they call on our strengths and bring us together by focusing our hearts and attention on the same problem that is unique to games. And that's what I'm trying to explore. And I think it is borne out by the quality of engagement with games that people have, that they are powerful on a level, particularly when they're networked, that goes beyond a lot of other media. Now, that is not to say that games can't do bad things. I don't like all games. I don't like the content of a lot of games. And people can be jerks when they're playing games, and games can be designed better or worse to elicit kind of pro-social and happy-making behaviors, or to turn people into jerks. So, for sure, it's not a universal thing. All games are awesome, but But if we can learn about how we can design games to pull out the best and provide the best, and end suffering and all of that, I think that's good.
Isn't childhood education a model here? I mean, kids basically play games amongst themselves to learn how to deal with the rest of society.
Yeah.
Anyone who's watched a 4-year-old, understands the games are an important way of playing and making their way in the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So this idea of games as training, it's very powerful in education theory and a lot of serious game design now. I can show you guys really quickly a game that I did in 2007 called World Without Oil. This is sort of an early version of this kind of SuperStruct type game. World Without Oil was set in this crazy alternate reality where gas prices nationwide started out at over $4 a gallon, which at the time was crazy. So I'll take you into that alternate reality. So look at that, shocking, oil shocker. Right. And this game was created with PBS just as an online version of the kind of content that PBS does. And what we wanted to do was get people to take seriously the idea that cheap, easily available gas might not always be a constant. And so you see this is week 1 here. This is when I talk about sort of a public archive of a game. This is an example. So we've archived, you can see the game week from week, how it developed. Why am I showing you this end? I forget what I was doing here. Anyway, people sort of lived in this reality for 6 weeks, and we asked them to live their real lives as if gas were too expensive, and so they were sort of practicing. Anyway, then it really happened, and so now we're running a blog where you can see gamers of this game be like, wow, it's really good that I started that guerrilla garden in my neighborhood because now we're using it, so people felt like they were able to practice for this reality. So that's kind of a cool predecessor project if you're interested in seeing worldwithout.oil.org.
One concern of parents to do with video games is that kids lock themselves in the room and stay in one place. So I would like to know if it's possible that we'll develop video games that can be played outdoors, or which can encourage kids to get out of the house. Is that something that?
Yeah, that's a burgeoning industry. Maybe you were here when I mentioned earlier alternate reality games. If you do a search for alternate reality or augmented reality games, massive amounts of money being spent in research labs, college campuses, game development industry, using everything from iPhones and GPS devices to one of the big new platforms is Mediascapes, the HP little thing that kind of knows where you are and other players are around you. And so there's all kinds of games that go out into reality. Now for kids, there's a problem, which is that we don't let kids in our culture out anywhere to go play anymore. So whether or not games will effectively change that and make it safe to go outside again is another problem. But for SuperStruct, there's all kinds of real-world gameplay going on. People are being sent on real-world missions. They're creating kind of geocaches with 2019 survival supplies. There was a big cave party in Santa Cruz last weekend where the climate refugees came up on the shore and had a big dinner party in a cave, and so people are doing face-to-face, and there's no limits on where you can go with these games, and certainly a lot of players seem interested in that out and about. Yeah.
How do you avoid getting rickrolled?
So I'm going to try and.
That's the way of saying greeted.
Yeah. So it was interesting. I made some notes. I was thinking on the way over here on the Caltrain, big lessons so far about just in the first 9 days. So right now we have a little over 4,000 players, and those are people who care about the game.
The other people care too. They're just playing a different game.
Well, okay, so it's true. Right, so one of the things that we did is we built this outlaw planet scenario. So like if our site got hacked, we could put that in game, right? Like in our game, there are people trying to grief the world. So we sort of built in like, we haven't failed if that happens. We're just learning now more about that outlaw planet scenario. You couldn't do that for every game. So one of my notes here was about the sort of the careful line between crowds and mobs. Like we haven't really promoted this game at all. We put a couple posts up like on our blogs, and we've been giving some talks and stuff. But like, you know, my friend of mine blogs for Boing Boing, and we have not asked them to put that up there yet because of the sense that we want to build a community that has some resilience before certain kinds of other communities show up. And you have a sense of, you guys know who like the, you know, especially now that they've got comments on Boing Boing, you can see that a lot of us readers are jerks on that site. So, you know, I think what you do is you try and build resilience so that when you get a broader audience, there will always be people who try and kind of, for their own fun, grief a community. So hopefully our community, you know, will be resilient enough to withstand that. When you get enough people who care about the game, you can usually do that.
That leads into the second thing. One of the attractions of games is the Tinkerbell effect. We can all believe that Tinkerbell will live. Tinkerbell doesn't live. Physics doesn't, games are attractive because the physics is broken, not because the physics works.
Well, I think it's a long conversation because that's taking a pretty constrained view of games, right? Like thinking about maybe particular kinds of video games. Like I don't think that what we're getting people to do in these games, and it really goes back to the sort of collaboration superpowers. Like, where is my slideshow? So these superpowers, like, I think players are really getting these, whether or not Tinkerbell dies or the physics engine is amplifying their action. They're really learning things like cooperation radar, which is the sort of instinctive sense of who would be the best ally on any given mission or who could help you solve a problem the best. That's real, and people are developing those skills, and they do apply, I'm sensing from my research, to real life. So some of it does translate well between games and reality.
Yeah,
in my sense.
but continuing with Tinkerbell, I'm more able to convince people to believe in Tinkerbell. I mean, this is a great skill, but even if I convince everybody, Tinkerbell is not going to pop up.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, SuperStruct is about
Yeah.
research that we're doing at the Institute that we think is pretty anchored in reality. So we're trying to bridge that gap between make-believe and kind of change the world.
So there's this concept, and you mentioned that there's these billions of hours of free time out there. If you could just tap into them, you could change everything. And the same idea is there with open source. If you just open the code, everybody will come help. And maybe you can talk a little about how you actually reach the people you'd like to come help. Like if you wanted a Wikipedia article on like the anatomy of a lung, like the guy who maybe did that research has got a job and a family, and he maybe doesn't have that free time. How do you reach those people?
So that's like awesome. So one of the reasons why we're doing SuperStruct is to research that problem. So I mentioned this research article about the economy of engagement, and that looks at why the rhetoric of open source and mass collab has sort of gotten ahead of the actuality. Most projects fail, all that sort of thing, right? So we need better ways of doing that for sure. And with SuperStruct, it's really about how we organize in the future. So the players are doing really weird things that suggest crazy possibilities. So one thing the players have created is something called SuperStruct, and they're just getting the site up. But the idea is that there will be people whose job it is to find specific micro ways for experts to contribute to these larger superstructures that they're doing. So what they want to do is they want to create like a matchmaking system between if you know how to do this, you're probably really busy, expensive, smart, hard to engage. How can we make what your contribution small enough or rewarding enough to get you this? They're doing weird stuff. So that's great. So we're just going to watch what the players come up with, and then when I talk about this research report we're going to write about the future of organizing and collaborating, that's the kind of thing we're going to think about. Like, what does it take to scale contribution and match, different people. People of a lot of time might not be qualified to make every kind of contribution. And open source scientists, all those sort of citizen science things are grappling with that too in really interesting ways. But we're working on it.
Hey Jane, can you talk a little bit more about what the decision criteria are for whether something is or isn't a game?
Yeah. So, like any academic field, game researchers have published more about what defines a game than any other subject. My personal, belief about a game is the most important thing about a game is the way it structures experience. So I believe that a game has to have a clear objective and limitations on how you can achieve that objective and some way to find out whether or not you have achieved that objective. So like golf is one of the great sort of examples. Like the objective of golf is to get a ball in a hole, and they've got this arbitrary constraint on it, which is you have to stand far away and use a stick, and then how close it is to the hole, and that's golf, right? So when people show me games, like, and Second Life is sort of one of those great examples. Like, Second Life sort of marketed as a game, but then the people making it were like, wait, no, it's not a game. And it's not a game because there's no clear objective when you get there. There's no constraints on what you can do other than the technology. So anyway, an arbitrary constraint is what I meant to say. I'm not sure I said that at first. If it's a real constraint, like you're constrained by the fact that there are only 24 hours a day or the technology sucks, that's not like an arbitrary constraint. So that's my sort of sense of how to break it, to define it. But there are many theories, competing theories.
So now you have a game, SuperStruct. Does it have a evolutionary component? That is, can the players of the game change the game?
Mm-hmm.
And if it does that, doesn't that violate your rule about games having frameworks and structures?
Oh, no. Well, so no, because it's total freedom within constraints, right? So like our players are not going to be able to tell us, we found out Reds doesn't exist or something. I mean, like we control the game by controlling the sort of central site. Now, what we're hoping to do is at the end of 6 weeks to say, SuperStruct 2, tell us when it's ready and we'll come and help you run it and let the players create the second version, because they've already built like ridiculous web tools for the game. Like we're nonprofit. We spent a few months developing this. They're going crazy building all kinds of mashups and just infrastructure everywhere, all over the web. So we're just going to let them build the next IFGF game, and we'll provide the research. They provide the world. And that's it's so there's like this project's very meta because SuperStruct is about the future of organizing and collaborating, and our players just in playing the game and how they want to help us make the game are showing us this completely scary but awesome just evolution of who you start a community and then the community owns the community, and then you either empower that or hinder it, and lots of interesting learning going on.
If we look under the hood, how many servers, what sort of infrastructure do you have supporting your central site, and what happens when you get slashed out?
Yeah. I don't know. To ask Chris Sumner's IT guy at IFT. They've got like a server and a backup server, and I don't know. They crunch some numbers, and I judged based on how many players I've gotten from other sites. It's actually interesting. I was going to share with you guys some participation metrics because I'm so sick of like games and experiences that claim so many members or players, but then you find out later they didn't do anything. So our traffic right now, we're registering 1% of people who are watching the site, and we're measuring IP addresses that come back more than once. So we've got about 50,000 people watching the game, and we're registering 1% of them, which in my experience is typical. So anyway, and then 50% of registered players have completed their first game mission. So half of them just kind of register and poke around and haven't even finished their first mission yet. And 10% of registered players have completed an advanced mission. So And so even when you think about like sort of harnessing this engagement, it's always that, and Clay Shirky talks about this in Here Comes Everybody, which everybody should read, talks about that sort of power law of contribution, and we're seeing that too. So part of it is, if Slashdot comes, well, probably only 1% of them will register, so that's okay. And you sort of count on like metrics like that to sort of figure out if only half of your users actually do anything, and that, so, yeah.
We want to encourage more people to do
We
it.
do. I'm designing the game to try and create, but it's what we were saying here, like you don't actually want everybody to participate 40 hours a week because most people might only have an hour of contribution to make that's useful. And then you want them to kind of be happy and that's it, right? And most non-experts will not have, 40 hours of contribution. So we want it to be a full experience for them, even if they just come and play once. Everybody in this room, just by the fact that you're here, has at least an hour of contribution in you. Yes. Imagine if we spent this hour playing the game instead of talking about it. That would have been awesome. So are we hitting? We're up on our hard fast time.
Oh, no, we've got another 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
If they're 10 minutes worth of questions.
I think we should just play, register. Everybody, plug your laptops. Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea that you're trying to harness this energy. But what's your take on, let's say, addiction to games?
Yeah.
Because people who spend 40, 60, 80 hours instead of just 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
So, what's your take? Would you actually try to limit them from playing this game, or maybe World of Warcraft? Did they just spend their entire life just playing it?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the space that we're dealing with, right? And like in the industry, game developers are dealing with it because they don't feel good, ethically about a gamer spending 80 hours a week playing a game, right? Most game designers actually don't want that. And then, I think I don't have any problem with somebody spending 8 hours a week playing a game if that game is integrated with what we would consider a real quality of life, right? So I work with a lot of companies that are trying to change the way work gets done at the office into a more game-like experience. So you wake up in the morning and your job is awesome because it's like run like a game, right? And instead of having departments, you have guilds and all this stuff. And it's a world of experimentation. Will this actually be good? Will it work? Nobody knows. But I think, if there is, an economic stream, you're making money playing a game, then that's great. Or if maybe, you're playing it with your kids and so it's holding your family together. There's all kinds of things that we can do in games that support real quality of life. And Ted Castronovo, the economist that I recommended, has some really far out ideas about the future, including if people spend more time in 3D environments, their need for money for cost of living goes down. And you could actually imagine a future society where people only need to work 10, 20 hours a week to support the quality of life they want because the digital world is cheaper. I mean, there's lots of ways for it to play out. And I'd like to see people connecting with reality, but I'm not opposed to it if it's in a game. That's okay because games are great.
So if people are playing games largely for entertainment or relaxation or escapism or whatever, how hard is it to take these sort of grim, heavy, work-like, real-world issues and rephrase them or restructure them in a way that is fun for people and not depressing?
Yeah, it's super hard. It's a challenge of a lifetime. When I say Nobel Prize for Game Designers 2032, that's how hard it is. I think if we could do it, it will change the world and it will be one of the hardest things we've done as a society. I think we have to try. I'm not crazy hardcore drank the Kool-Aid. I'm not sure we can do it, but I think I think game developers have an ethical obligation to try, and gamers are too smart and too big a resource to let not do anything to help the world. So it's super hard. World Without Oil was a really good example because it was a subject that was totally dry and bad and boring. And for the people who showed up to play, the sort of social dynamics and you had this little dashboard that was giving you real-time feedback on what was happening where you lived, and you just it was fun, it was cool. You liked getting poked by the game. So I think there are things we can learn how to do it, but it'll be hard for sure, and it might not work. So, like any good project. I saw a great talk by the founder of the X Prize a few weeks ago at the Long Now Foundation, and he was saying the only way to do something important is to work on something with a high probability of failure. That's the only way you'll ever make a breakthrough, because up until that moment of breakthrough, everybody thought it was crazy and ridiculous and would never work. So that's what I'm doing.
So how does this online gaming stuff differ from trading stocks and bonds real time?
That's there's so many good ways to answer that question, because the way I think about it is, in order for a game to be fair and successful, everybody has to be playing the same game and kind of aiming at the same objective. And you get these systems which people treat like games, and they sort of play them, or they're trying to game the system, but they're not playing the same game as everybody else. So metaphorical games, I don't think the metaphor holds up to that sort of sense of shared adventure or shared enterprise. For gamers, even if you're trying to just knock each other out of the game or kill each other off, there's a very clear shared sense of what you're there to do, and big systems like stocks and bonds, not so much.
Any other questions here? Here you go.
What do you call activities that are fun but don't have a conspicuous goal? I mean, just go out for a hike.
Play, yeah. And I think play, a lot of people are working on why play is good and we could do interesting things with play. And for me, the difference is play is good when you want to try out different things and kind of get a sense of what your goal should be. And then when you know what your goal is, then a game will help structure you towards a goal. So they go together. And some people are, there's all kinds of psychological research on people who are attracted to play versus gaming. And so we might have to start hybridizing these experiences. I mean, yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Yes, and come on Monday, please. Wait, let me put up. I want to put this up one more time. Y'all, come on Monday. We need awesome people like yourself for the Sundance Channel to film. Where is it? Here it is. Just RSVP to my email address. What are the odds I brought a card? No.
It's on the website.
Hi, good to meet you. I'll take your card. I can also, awesome.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.